Welcome to Everbright. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and let us know what you think in the comments.
Yeah.
We love hearing from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're all about bringing some amazing work from around the globe to English speakers. And today, we're diving deep into something that is impacting almost everyone, especially young people.
Yeah.
TikTok.
TikTok.
We're going to explore how this wildly popular app
Right.
affects our brains.
Yeah.
Drawing on insights from Spanish psychiatrist Dr. Marian Rojas Estapé.
Interesting.
By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much clearer understanding of this platform and its potential impact.
Sure.
So we all know TikTok is incredibly engaging,
Yeah.
but why is it so addictive?
Right.
We've all lost hours scrolling, haven't we?
It's fascinating how TikTok taps into our brain's reward system,
Oh, yeah.
specifically by triggering the release of dopamine.
Right, dopamine. We hear that word a lot, but I'll admit,
Yeah.
I don't fully understand how it works.
Well, think of dopamine as a signal that tells your brain, hey, this feels good. Do that again.
Okay.
It's essential for motivation learning and, yes, pleasure.
Okay.
Dr. Rojas Estapé highlights 3 key features of TikTok that really ramp up dopamine production.
Okay.
First, the short video format. It's easy to consume, instant gratification, boom, dopamine.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Short videos, quick hits of satisfaction. What's next?
The second feature is the personalized content feed.
Okay.
TikTok's algorithm learns what you like
Right.
and keeps feeding it to you.
Yeah.
So you're constantly seeing things that trigger that dopamine release. It creates a sort of echo chamber that's hard to break free from.
It's true. My feed feels so tailored to me, and before I know it, I've fallen down a rabbit hole of videos about, well, you name it.
Yeah.
It brings us to the third feature, right?
Exactly.
The continuous playback.
It's like an endless stream of bite-sized entertainment. You
Wow.
finish one video and boom, another one starts playing. It's like a never-ending game of Candy Crush, always offering that next level, that next dopamine hit.
And that constant stimulation, especially for young people whose brains are still developing,
Right.
can actually modify their reward system.
Yeah.
It's like we're rewiring our brains to crave this constant stream of dopamine.
Precisely.
Wow.
Dr. Rojas Estapé compares it to a willpower battery that gets depleted with each decision we make.
Okay.
And when we're constantly bombarded with easy dopamine hits, it's like we're constantly draining that battery without recharging it.
This is where it gets really interesting because it's not just about getting hooked on an app.
Right.
It has implications for our willpower,
Yeah.
our mental health, even our ability to cope with real-life challenges.
Absolutely. One of the most concerning aspects is the potential impact on willpower.
What?
If we're constantly indulging in instant gratification, that willpower muscle doesn't get a chance to develop.
Yeah.
And this can have real-world consequences.
Like what kinds of consequences?
Well, think about it. If you're used to the constant dopamine rush of TikTok real life, with its challenges, delayed gratification, and sometimes, let's face it, boring moments can seem incredibly dull in comparison.
It's like we're training our brains to expect instant reward, and when we don't get it, we get frustrated, impatient, maybe even anxious.
Exactly. We become less tolerant of frustration.
Right.
We struggle to focus on tasks that require sustained effort, and this ties into the broader issue of attention deficit that we're seeing in society today.
This is all pretty sobering stuff, and it's not just theoretical.
Right.
Dr. Rojas Estapé actually shares an anecdote about a successful lawyer who admitted to feeling desperate about their TikTok use.
Wow.
If high-achieving individuals are struggling with this, it really highlights how powerful these platforms can be.
It's a perfect example of how even people with strong willpower can get caught in this cycle.
Right.
And it's particularly concerning when you consider the potential impact on mental health.
Right, because it's not just about attention deficit.
Yeah,
TikTok can actually worsen existing mental health conditions, can it?
absolutely. Dr. Rojas Estapé points out that it can be particularly harmful for people struggling with eating disorders.
Okay.
The constant exposure to idealized bodies and lifestyles on TikTok can be incredibly triggering.
Right.
And because the algorithm personalizes content, it can create an echo chamber that reinforces these unhealthy ideals.
Wow. This is a lot to take in. So we've established that excessive TikTok use can negatively affect our brains, our willpower, and our mental health. But let's be realistic. It's not like we could just tell everyone to delete TikTok.
Right.
So what can we do to mitigate these negative effects?
You're right. Simply telling everyone to delete TikTok isn't a realistic solution.
Right.
It's about understanding the potential impact and learning to use it responsibly.
Okay.
It starts with awareness.
Awareness of what specifically,
Right.
what should we be paying attention to?
Be mindful of how TikTok makes you feel.
Okay.
Do you feel anxious or irritable when you can't access it? Do you lose track of time? Are you neglecting other responsibilities because you're glued to the app?
Mm-hmm.
These are signs that your TikTok use might be becoming problematic.
That's a good point. It's like any potentially addictive behavior, right?
Yeah.
We need to be honest with ourselves about how it's affecting us.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that these platforms are designed to keep us engaged.
Right.
They use sophisticated algorithms to do that. It's almost like they're playing a game against our willpower.
It does feel like that sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like I'm being manipulated by the algorithm.
That's a great way to put it. They are constantly tweaking those algorithms to keep us hooked,
Yeah.
to make us crave that next dopamine hit.
Right.
It's a self-perpetuating cycle.
Wow.
The more we engage, the more data they collect and the better their algorithms become at predicting what will keep us scrolling.
So what does this all mean for the future? Are we all destined to become mindless TikTok zombies?
Not necessarily, but it does raise some serious questions about the future of attention focus and even critical thinking.
Yep.
If we're constantly bombarded with bite-sized information, do we lose the ability to engage with more complex ideas?
That's a scary thought.
Yeah.
And what about the impact on creativity?
Right.
Some people argue that TikTok is actually a platform for creative expression,
Right.
but is it really?
It's a complex issue. On the one hand, TikTok can provide a platform for people to showcase their talents and connect with others who share their interests.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's a risk of homogenization, of everyone trying to create content that fits into that same narrow short-form format.
So instead of fostering genuine creativity, it might actually be stifling it.
That's a possibility we need to be aware of. It's important to encourage young people, especially, to explore different forms of creative expression,
Right.
to think outside the TikTok box.
Think outside the TikTok box.
Oh, I like that.
But it's not just about creativity, is it? What about the impact on our relationships and social skills?
That's another area of concern. If we're spending hours each day scrolling through TikTok, are we neglecting real-life interactions?
Yeah.
Are we losing the ability to have meaningful conversations, to read social cues, to empathize with others?
This all ties into Dr. Rojo Sestapi's concept of the willpower battery, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If we're constantly draining that battery on instant gratification, we have less energy left for things that require more effort,
Right.
like building strong relationships.
Precisely. It's about finding a balance.
Okay.
We need to be mindful of how we're spending our time and energy.
Right.
Are we investing in activities that nourish us, that build our willpower muscle, that deepen our connections with others? Or are we letting those things fall by the wayside as we get sucked into the endless scroll?
Okay, so we've talked about the potential negative impacts, but let's shift gears and talk about solutions. What can we do as individuals and as a society to navigate this TikTok age in a healthy and mindful way? It feels like we're at a crossroads, doesn't it? We have this incredibly powerful technology that's woven into the fabric of our lives, but we're just starting to understand its potential impact on our brains and our behavior.
It's a defining challenge of our time. And I think the solution starts with education.
Okay.
We need to teach young people about the science of
Yeah.
addiction,
Right.
about how these platforms are designed to keep us hooked, and about the potential consequences of excessive use. Not in a way that demonizes technology, but
Yeah.
in a way that empowers them to make informed choices.
I completely agree knowledge is power. But it's not just about educating young people, is it? Adults need to be just as aware of these issues.
Absolutely. We all need to be more mindful of our own TikTok use and the messages we're sending to the younger generation. If we're constantly glued to our phones, how can we expect our kids to prioritize real-world interactions and activities?
It's about practicing what we preach,
Yeah.
right? Setting a good example.
Yeah.
And speaking of setting an example,
Yeah.
parents have a particularly important role to play here. Any advice for parents who are concerned about their kids' TikTok use?
First and foremost, talk to them.
Okay.
Have open and honest conversations about the potential risks and benefits of TikTok. Explain how the algorithm works, how it can create echo chambers and reinforce unhealthy comparisons.
That's a good point. We need to help them understand that what they're seeing on TikTok isn't always a realistic reflection of the world.
Exactly. And it's important to set clear boundaries and expectations around screen time.
Okay.
Be consistent with those boundaries and make sure you're enforcing them in a way that feels fair and respectful.
So it's not just about saying no to TikTok. It's about creating a healthy balance, right? Encouraging them to engage in other activities that nourish their minds and bodies.
Precisely, encourage them to explore their creativity offline, to spend time in nature, to build face-to-face relationships. Help them discover the joy of activities that require sustained effort and delayed gratification.
It's about showing them that there's a whole world out there beyond the screen. And it reminds me of something we talked about earlier, the importance of diversifying our media diet.
That's a great point. It's not just about limiting TikTok, it's about broadening our horizons. Encourage your kids to read books. Listen to podcasts, engage in real-life conversations. Help them cultivate a healthy skepticism toward the information they consume online.
Those are all great tips for parents. But it's important to remember that this isn't just about individual responsibility. We also need to look at the bigger picture, at the role of tech companies and policymakers in shaping our digital landscape.
Absolutely. We need to hold these companies accountable for the design of their platforms and the impact they're having on our brains and our society. Are they prioritizing our well-being, or are they prioritizing profit?
It's a tough question, but one we need to be asking. And we need to be advocating for policies that promote digital well-being, things like age-appropriate content restrictions, regulations around data privacy, and even maybe some like a digital nutrition label that helps users understand the potential impact of different platforms and apps.
I love that idea, a digital nutrition label. It would help us make more informed choices about how we're spending our time and attention online.
This deep dive has been incredibly thought-provoking. It's clear that we're just beginning to understand the complex interplay between technology and our brains. But as we learn more, it's crucial that we use this knowledge to create a digital world that supports our well-being and our humanity. What are your final thoughts for our listeners today?
Remember that technology is a tool. It can be used for good or for bad. It can connect us, inspire us, educate us, but it can also distract us, divide us, and even manipulate us. The key is to be aware of its power, to use it consciously and intentionally, and to never let it take control of our lives.
Beautifully said. And on that note, we're going to wrap up this episode of Everbright. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. If you found it valuable, be sure to hit that subscribe button and leave us a comment, letting us know what you think. We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep shining bright.